You know, sometimes when there's a big event that happens in your life, or maybe you're left with like a big decision that you have to make, and they tell you, hey, take some time, sit on it for a second, gather your emotions, sleep on it, then come back and see if you feel still see if you still feel the same way.
The 24-hour rule, is that what you're alluding to there, Jimmy?
Generally there. Yeah, sleep on it, try to evaluate other perspectives on the matter, and then see if your mind changes. So I tried that after the Colts announced yesterday that Anthony Richardson was getting benched for Joe Flacco. And yesterday, I was rather livid with that decision for a lot of different reasons. I feel like it sets the franchise back to some extent. I feel like it leaves them in a potential purgatory situation. I think that if this is ultimately the way things would go, that accountability needs to be had, and not just for Anthony Richardson. Accountability would need to be had at that point for Shane Steichen, and certainly for general manager Chris Ballard. We'll get into all of that today, but suffice to say, the 24-hour rule didn't do anything for me. Did nothing. I'm still just as perplexed by it as I am right now, and as I was yesterday. On top of that, though, at least the light at the end of the tunnel is Shane Steichen has spoken to the media, and we're going to react to these clips in real time. They're not live, obviously, but they've been cut up and they were just made in the last 20 to 25 minutes for the rationale for this decision, for where the franchise goes moving forward, whether I think that is the right way for them to proceed, and if it's not, why they are now down a dangerous road that not only impacts this season, but impacts 2025, where, in theory, you would have had a clearer roadmap for where this franchise was, where their long-term goals were going to be, and where they rank among the entire landscape of the AFC. So to rehash, Anthony Richardson, benched. Joe Flacco, the starter. All accounts, this move was done because you want to give the team the best chance to win. At least that's been the report in the last 24 hours. Shane Steichen was, again, at his media session today. Eddie will start with that initial clip, Shane Steichen on benching Anthony Richardson and starting Joe Flacco.
All right, I'll start off just by, confirming Joe will be our quarterback going forward. Tough decision, but one I felt was in the best interest of our football team. I feel that Joe gives us the best chance to win right now. With that being said, not giving up on Anthony by any means, really not. He's a young player with a ton of talent, and he'll use this time to continue to develop and grow as a professional.
Now, before we react in detail to that, there's a follow-up question, or follow-up along those lines of questionings, which is acknowledging that what he just said there about him still being able to learn and develop on the bench is totally polar opposite to everything the Colts have said all offseason, to everything they said in training camp, to everything they said when the season started, which is, to paraphrase, it's a reps issue for him. He learned a ton last year. He's ready to go. He's mentally sharp. It's a matter of repetition and gaining more experience and growing by doing. Shane Steichen was asked on AR being able to learn despite not playing, which again is contrary to what Shane Steichen and the Colts have been sending to fans all along.
It's a great question. I know I said that, and things change there. So I think right now, sitting back and seeing a veteran that's done it at a high level for a long time, you can develop that way as well, and continue to go through that process and learn.
Look, people are allowed to change their mind on things. People are allowed to sway and pivot on their viewpoints on things, certainly. But with game day management and operations, when you're the head of a group, when your sole purpose of being here is to build and develop talent, and then you say one thing regarding the star quarterback, saying that he is now ready to learn by doing, we have passed the phase of sitting and learning on the bench. To go and pivot regardless of whether or not they agree with this sentiment, it should be the reaction of most Colts fans today. They were wrong in their evaluation of Anthony Richardson, at least to this point. I'm not saying that he can't come back from this as a player, but their evaluation going into 2024 was wrong. They told all Colts fans that Anthony Richardson was at this stage of his career only missing playing time, which is fair to say because every example that you want to throw out of guys that learned better by benching or by just sitting out of the gate, because that benching list is few and far between. Most cases it is sitting out of the gate. Every one of those quarterbacks that you would list to me have more starts than Anthony Richardson did in college. Maybe you could find one anomaly for me. Most of them are not coming into the National Football League, with the scouting report being incredibly high upside, very raw prospect, lack of reps.
Trey Lance.
And look how that ended.
Bingo.
That is now the trajectory the Colts are on, whether they like it or not. That's why I said half flippantly, and no, I don't think it's going to happen 6 days from now. I think that would be even more crazy than what's happened right now. But that's why I said half flippantly, the trade deadline's in 6 days. Because the move they have made is one you don't come back from. For Anthony Richardson, maybe he gets that second chance with the Seahawks in 5 years, or with the Broncos, or the Cardinals, or wherever. Maybe there's a second destination for him. But the sample size in general, let alone for quarterbacks that are as inexperienced as he is at the position, to come back from this in the same uniform, very few and far between.
I've got some thoughts based off those two clips.
Sure.
Toward the end of the first one, he was talking about Shane Steichen, about benching Anthony Richardson, about being a professional.
Yeah.
And then again, of sitting behind a veteran and learning from Joe Flacco. This is me just pure speculation. Pure speculation
Sure.
on my part.
Sure. We don't have a
Reading between
reckless
the lines.
speculation sounder, but sure. Yep. Got you. All right, we're going tinfoil hat. Wow. Okay. Out of the gate.
What if Anthony Richardson was already on the brink of losing the trust from his teammates in the locker room?
Can you elaborate a little bit for me on that?
Absolutely can. It's year number 2. He's 22, 21 years old. As we've already highlighted, 10 starts in his career so far, 22, 21 in total since he arrived on campus at Florida. What if he never truly learned the proper avenues or the proper steps of becoming an NFL quarterback, not on the field, but off of it? What if it's the guys aren't seeing him putting in the work behind the scenes in terms of being the first one there, the last one to leave,
Taking good notes, observing things,
whatever that case may be.
Yeah.
And on Sunday, the head tap of him quitting for that play on his team was just the iceberg for some of those key voices, the Zaire Franklins, the Ryan Kellys, the DeForest Buckners, Jonathan Taylor, except Michael Pittman Jr. All these guys who have dealt with injuries this year that are working their way back on the field or playing through something. And this guy is not only taking the proper channels to become a really good quarterback in the NFL, but now he's, subbing himself out of the game because he's tired. That to me could be what's at potential stake here.
So it's a fair tinfoil hat speculation because, again, that's something that we would have no way at this time of validating on. Let's entertain for the idea. Again, Eddie's not reporting that. Eddie's just speculating for how the Colts arrived at this decision. Let's say Anthony Richardson, behind the scenes, is not doing all the things that it takes to be an NFL quarterback. And there's been slip-ups in the past, and this was the tip of the iceberg, right? Or this was the final straw. First off, and you can say, well, the Colts are at no liberty to actually share that. Okay, fine. It's been contrary to everything they've said. All offseason was, oh, man, mentally this guy is as sharp as you can find. He grasps the game at a high level. He's doing all the right things. And I get a lot of those are buzzwords, but you're still going on the record saying it. So that would all be fabricated, number one. Number two, I'm not upset at Colts players like veterans on this roster. Ryan Kelly, DeForest Buckner, Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed, whoever. I'm not upset at them if they were genuinely frustrated, and for them personally, him pulling himself out of the game was the final straw, and they had decided that enough is enough. All that can happen, and this change can be made, but it cannot arrive without accountability. And that has been the biggest issue with this franchise for the better part of the last 7 seasons. And it starts with Chris Ballard. This was Chris Ballard's selection. This was Chris Ballard's prized quarterback. He had gone as far as to say that, oh man, you would have used a number 1 pick overall on Anthony Richardson because of how confident he was with him. Very happy that he was able to select him where he did. I'm willing to hear excuses to a point for job security for somebody. And all we've heard out of West 56th Street over these 7 seasons is what happened in 2019 and the retirement of Andrew Luck and how it caught everybody by surprise and it set up the franchise for potential failure and they needed to recover from it. We're 5 years past that point now, going on year 6 this coming offseason. All this Joe Flacco move to Anthony Richardson is a recycle of the movie you've seen prior to Anthony Richardson's arrival. It is Matt Ryan. It is Phillip Rivers. It is Carson Wentz. And the movie ends the same way. And that's the part that I really feel for Colts fans for, because Kevin mentioned this yesterday. Eddie mentioned it a little bit as well. It's legitimately a tough time to be a Colts fan right now. Because on the one hand, you feel like it is development and growth of your young quarterback. But now with this change, on the other hand, you want to be optimistic about winning in the short term. And maybe Joe Flacco gives you the best chance to do that. But perhaps they don't see in the moment, or maybe they do. This is the same movie and the same nightmare they've been living for the better part of the last 5 seasons. The Colts currently have a 33% chance to make the playoffs. That's based on most models that project that out. JMV would probably call me a nerd getting in the weeds on there, but look, what's better? Looking at a model that goes by strength of schedule and a bunch of simulations, or, yeah, you know what? I think that they can beat the Bills. Like, you're just going off of 2 different data points. Who's to say one is more important than the other? I'm just telling you where the forecast is at right now. That does not get factored or changed. Those simulations don't change based on Joe Flacco coming in. The bump of Joe Flacco combined with the games they have on the schedule coming up, these next 3, 4, 5 games, for me personally, doesn't move the needle at all for their playoff chances. And I also understand the idea of needing a culture shift within the locker room, perhaps, that maybe Anthony Richardson has totally lost his teammates. And maybe Shane Steichen felt that he had to make a move because of that. Here's my issue, and this goes to our next clip. And you can tell me all you want that he is dodging this question. I don't believe Shane Steichen is. I believe Shane Steichen is honestly answering this question. Eddie, it is Anthony Richardson tapping out if it had any impact on his benching. And keep in mind, the answer yesterday, when James Boyd asked it, was no. This is today, 24 hours after the fact, asking Shane Steichen if the tap out by Anthony Richardson had any impact on his benching.
It didn't. I mean, he knows that he can't do that in that situation. You know, that's part of the growth and the development process that we go through. And again, I think Joe gives us the best chance right now going forward.
Okay, so you're going to have to forgive me. I realize we live in a crazy society where taking people at their word, apparently we just don't do that as much anymore. I'm going to choose to do that there. That is Shane Steichen going in front of the media, having an opportunity to spin the narrative on this story however he wants. And the choice he made is that Anthony Richardson tapping out, saying I'm tired, had nothing to do with the decision. That's the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts saying it was not a basis of that one moment of him tapping out. It had nothing to do with it. It was Joe Flacco gives you the best chance to win. A couple weeks ago, my mindset with the Colts, in terms of like a job security standpoint of where this team was, is that I really like Shane Steichen. I think he's a great dude, easy to talk to, easy to communicate with. I think that he is a terrific offensive mind, and I think that he is the type of coach that you could see a franchise trying to build around. There's still part of me that believes that, even though I don't necessarily agree with the last couple weeks and putting Anthony Richardson in situations where you're going full baptism by fire on him to the point that you're always going 3rd and long and it's 4 and 5 step drops instead of short and easy throws. That's a little head scratching to me, but you need to trust him as the head coach to be able to make the right decisions to develop the quarterback, and I suppose you're trying to do that here. But the end of that clip, Eddie, play me that one more time. The end of the clip is the part that sticks out to me more than anything. This again.
He knows that he can't do that in that situation. You know, that's part of the growth and the development process that we go through. And again, I think Joe gives us the best chance right now going forward.
Okay, so that is now a public declaration that the Colts feel like Joe Flacco gives them the best chance to win ball games right now. They are saying that the aged veteran who has more experience, who has been in more situations, who has won a Super Bowl, who did catch lightning in a bottle and lead the Browns to a playoff win a year ago, he is saying that they have the best chance to win now with Joe Flacco, which again is Phillip Rivers, is Matt Ryan, is Carson Wentz. But why it's important to me if Shane Steichen's saying he gives us the best chance to win is now, not that there wasn't before, now there's real skin in the game. Now you are saying when it was supposed to be a year of winning, sir, every locker room wants to win, every organization wants to win, but it was the development of Anthony Richardson. Now you're saying you're okay with punting on that, once again kicking that can down the road until 2025 or until Joe Flacco gets hurt or until they change their mind again arbitrarily. Now you're saying that your opportunity is now. Your window is now. Your window for what? I have no idea. I don't know all the inner workings of every contract that the Colts have on their books. John pointed this out yesterday on the Ride with JMV. I would assume there are incentives to making the playoffs and winning a playoff game. And I get that, right? These are people fighting for their livelihoods. I understand that element of things. The Colts did not build a team in the 2024 offseason to go contend for anything other than maybe an AFC South title. They re-signed everybody because they felt like they were a play away, which they were, from dethroning the Texans. If the mission this year was to go win now, Flacco should have been the starter from the get-go. That's an argument that I'm willing to hear Colts fans cry foul on, but they made their bet on this. They made the decision that Anthony Richardson needed to develop with real-world experience, and they were right. Like, you can argue all you want whether he's shown real growth or whether he is coming along at the pace you'd like to see him do that at, but they were right about the development thing. This is not a matter of suddenly he's going to sit behind Joe Flacco and things are going to click clearer for him. He is one of the most raw and inexperienced quarterback prospects, certainly in my lifetime, and in quite some time in the National Football League. The issue is starts. The issue is reps. The issue is experience for him. And Kevin said it yesterday. If you're kidding yourself that him being in second or third team practice reps is the same thing as real game exercises, you're out of your mind. It's not even close. He's not going to take first team reps anymore. Those are all going to go to Flacco. So you are kicking this can down the road to 2025 with, think back for a second, Colts fans.
Joe gives us the best chance right now going forward.
Indeed. Joe does. Go get him, Joe.
Burrow?
If only. Think back to Tyler Goodson dropping that ball against Houston. Think back to the entire offseason. Think back where your headspace was about Anthony Richardson. Think back to every question mark you had about him and how you were worried of what the 2024 campaign would hold for you and how you worried about how he would develop. But the silver lining in your mind was, well, hey, he's going to get the opportunity now. He's going to get a chance to go out there and learn on the fly. And hopefully, after a season worth of football, there is at least a clear and obvious observation on him for whether or not real growth is happening or whether there is a foundation to be able to have that answer about him. He has played in 6 games this season. You go back to 2023, well, he didn't finish all those contests. He's appeared in 10 NFL games. That is not an evaluation period on a quarterback that had, Eddie, 9, 10 starts at Florida?
I think it was 12.
12 starts in college. 12! And now all of a sudden, 10 is good. He's not ready. Let's go bench him. So back to the Joe Flacco of all of this. Joe Flacco gives you the best chance to win. Okay. Now there's expectations. We're going to at some point spend an entire segment on Chris Ballard. I don't know where the line should be for Shane Steichen. But to some extent, and I'm in a minority on this point, I acknowledge that in the front end. I don't believe that general managers and coaches need to necessarily be attached at the hip. A lot of people feel strongly about that. I think that if you believe, whether it's the mind of the GM or the mind of the coach, if you feel like one of them can't miss, is a foundational piece that you want to build around, you don't fire both of them for the sake of it. This has moved me a bit. Because unless Shane Steichen is being influenced from people higher above him, which I would like to think that the Colts as a franchise have given him the keys in that respect, and it's his decisions here, Shane Steichen has chosen to go win now. And that's what they're doing with Joe Flacco, which now means they're held accountable the rest of the season. This roster better make the playoffs. Because if they don't, you've wasted an entire year of quarterback development. You're not making the playoffs in the scenario I'm painting out. And you're totally back to square one with likely a record that keeps you out of a situation where you're punting and taking another quarterback in the NFL draft.
What input did Jim Irsay have in this decision?
He didn't. Like I said.
Did you meet with him?
Yeah, had conversations, but ultimately it was my decision.
Okay, again, I'm sorry. I'm going to be the guy that takes people for their word. Jim Irsay didn't have an impact in this decision. You can call me naive. You can call me whatever you want. This is Shane Steichen in front of microphones, like I am right now, saying Jim Irsay didn't have a say in that decision. It's Shane Steichen's call. Now there's expectations this year. Now all of a sudden, for the Indianapolis Colts, as they sit at 4-4, the AFC South effectively out of reach unless the Texans self-implode. Which, by the way, I'm not saying they're going to, but if you missed this during the Colts chaos yesterday, and I would totally understand if you did, Stephon Diggs is out for the year. Like, that's a massive weapon out of Houston's offense now, and they were already down Nico Collins. And they still have a tough schedule ahead as well. I think their wide receiver depth is such that they'll be fine, but that was one of those win now all-in moves that made the Texans such a darling pick for some people to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl this year. So maybe you're clinging on to that, but we've now gone away from the quarterback development conversation. The world that we're in now is the Indianapolis Colts firmly believe they have a better chance to win games with Joe Flacco. They're willing to kick to the side the development project of Anthony Richardson and are in win-now mode. What does win-now mode mean? What would be a successful outcome from this decision for the Indianapolis Colts? We'll get into that on the other side. Plus, still to come, we'll get a national reaction from this decision by the Colts to bench Anthony Richardson for Joe Flacco. Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports is going to join us. We'll take it back on the local perspective. Jolie Ericson at 2 o'clock, correct, Eddie?
Yes, sir.
Jolie Ericson will join us top of the 2 o'clock hour. He was at that media scrum or press conference, rather, for Shane Steichen. We'll get his thoughts on all this. The locker room itself, even though Shane Steichen says tapping out had nothing to do with it, what has he heard directly in his reporting, and where did this tapping out situation, giving up situation, weigh into Anthony Richardson, perhaps losing that locker room, and where do the Colts come from here? Plus, the undercurrent of all of this, and I realize Colts are the dominant conversation, but NBA season's underway, and I've already seen 8 Celtics jerseys on the drive-in today. The defending champs are either invading or the local fans that are Celtics fans are invading tonight. Chris Denary, voice of FanDuel Sports Network, going to join us at the bottom of the 2:30 hour. But when we come back, winning for the Colts, what does that look like? We'll discuss on the other side on Query and Company. We'll discuss that on the other side on Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. But before we step away, I would like to remind you that this opening segment, as has been the case, is brought to you by our fine friends over at Jiffy Lube. Now through the end of the year, anyone who belongs to a monthly car wash program can save $20 off a signature service oil change and get a free tire rotation over at Jiffy Lube. Just point out your car wash sticker, and Jiffy Lube will do the rest. That's big savings from your trusted one-stop shop for all your vehicle maintenance, where you never need an appointment at Jiffy Lube. Other side, Colts, they want to win now. What would be success for the Colts with Joe Flacco under center? We'll discuss next on The Fan. It is, in fact, Query and Company. Jimmy Cook here in the DriveHooper.com studios. Eddie Garrison, the voice you heard as well to that first segment. Behind the ones and twos. Full-scale reaction still on the Colts' decision to bench Anthony Richardson for Joe Flacco. And the more clear-cut comments today from Shane Steichen as he had media availability for the first time since that decision was reported yesterday, saying that Joe Flacco gives them the best chance to win. If you've had conversations with me, be it on or off the air, about the Indianapolis Colts going into 2024, and the idea of winning comes up, the question I've asked is win what? What would they be in contention for? What are they trying to fight for to add some hardware or add some accomplishments to the resume that's lacking of Chris Ballard? It's not the Super Bowl. Joe Flacco is not that type of elevation. You could make the argument Joe Flacco hasn't been that type of elevation in 5 years, 6 years, maybe more. There's not an acquisition that they would make based on past history between now and next Tuesday's trade deadline that would tell you that a team that, based on what they did all this offseason, was not a team that was building to go all chips in, win now mode.
All chips in, period.
One of my favorite sound bites on the board. That wasn't done this year. So what are we really talking about for contention for them? What are they fighting for at 4-4 on the season? Because the point I've seen nationally is a reasonable one to this regard. There are a lot of teams, once you get past the division winners, that are garbage, that are struggling in similar manners to how the Colts are. Not all similar. Some of them think they have a quarterback. Some of them think they are on the right path in that department, and they're a piece or two away. But some of them have quarterback issues. Look at the Steelers. I'm not in on the Russell Wilson train yet. I'm just not. I saw too much bad football in Denver to think that he has found a career renaissance now with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I don't think Justin Fields was that much of a liability. I like them trying to develop him there. But
Colts have the head-to-head over them, too. That's important to note.
They do. That's a tiebreak too important. They also are, 2 up on the loss side, the Steelers. But noted that they do have the tiebreak.
I don't think Pittsburgh has played a divisional game yet either, so they still have their 2 games against Baltimore and Cincinnati.
And maybe they get cannibalized, and that's kind of what I had projected out of the gate, Eddie, when we were talking about how bad the Bengals were and how they were stumbling. I still think to this day, Cincinnati winds up being a playoff team. I think it's either Baltimore at this stage, you could safely say either Baltimore or Pittsburgh wins the North. A lot of ground would have to be made up there by Cincinnati. Not impossible, but a lot of ground would have to be made up. I think Cincinnati gets in. Denver. It's a very weird story there in Denver. Great defensive unit, and the Bo Nix experience has been enjoyable, fun. And certainly for Denver fans, they haven't had a ton to cheer about since Manning, let alone at that position. So maybe there's finally stability there for them. That's what you're going up against. You're going up against Bo Nix and the Broncos. The Chargers, you know where I stand with that. Every dang year, they're picked to win the AFC West by national pundits, though I don't think they were this year. Maybe they finally come to their senses. But Justin Herbert and the Chargers, they're a little banged up like they always are. But Jim Harbaugh in there to revitalize, that's who you're going up against. And then it's everybody else around you, which at this point isn't as crowded as it was a couple weeks ago. The Colts and the Bengals are the 2 teams on the outside looking in this playoff picture that still have legitimate hope to get in there. It's over for the Dolphins. It's over for the Browns. Same for the Raiders, the Jaguars, the Patriots, the Jets, and the Titans. You're talking about historic comebacks to save their season, with the best of them being 2-6. 2-5, I guess, if you're going by win percentage. So that's where you're at. The Colts' win now bar right now is to make the playoffs. Get there, and then I guess see what happens.
Anthony Richardson meeting with the media. This is from Kevin Bowen. He shared what Richardson had to say in his opening statement.
Of course, everybody knows the news. I'm not starting this upcoming week. Of course, it hurts. As a competitor, definitely don't want to be told that, you're not the guy anymore, for the upcoming week. But, it's all good. I'm using this moment as an opportunity to grow and just learn from my mistakes.
Look, that's how it should be handled. I said that on Monday. if you're Anthony Richardson, you're 22 years old, I'm not defending him tapping out. Optically, it is as big of a white flag as you're going to find in the sport. In all of sport, you can make the case, even as we've, the macho when men were men, like type of just, smash mouth football that was your dad's football or your grandpa's football. Like, that's been gone away with to some extent by the NFL with rule changes, style of play, all of that. But the one thing that's still not socially acceptable, and I'm in agreement with you on that, is quitting on your guys and tapping out. It's an inexcusable look. And I said on Monday, you hold yourself accountable if you're Anthony Richardson at your media availability. You can parse the quotes there if you feel like that's adequate enough or not, but he is correct at the back end. He has to learn and grow from it. One thing I will note from that, though, Richardson said twice in there, I'm not the starting quarterback this upcoming week. Maybe I'm reading tea leaves here, but I am certainly reading tea leaves. That doesn't sound like somebody that thinks his season is done with the Colts. The head coach, though, per Kevin Bowen as well, this one isn't on audio. It is just a direct question from Kevin. Steichen on if this is it's a question from the press conference. I don't know if Kevin directly asked this, but Kevin's tweet, Steichen on if this is a 1 week benching for Anthony Richardson. No. Joe will be our guy moving forward. And the Colts have already, it's been reported, right, that Anthony Richardson will be the backup in this regard, correct?
Yes, sir.
So that outlines him as
Sorry,
Hey, got one right. Quiz Show is back with us as well. So he's the backup. That would be he's not coming back again in case of injury. So part one of dissecting who's around the Colts for win now mode is behind us. But realistically for them, where is the margin for error at 4-4 on the season between being a playoff team and finishing with a 7-10 season or an 8-9 campaign that has you on the outside looking in, out in the cold, shivering for what could have been from a development standpoint of Anthony Richardson, looking as other teams celebrate their playoff games, and then knowing that from a draft standpoint to try to get yourself out of this mess, you've hurt yourself even more. Where is that line? Where is that margin for error starting this week with Minnesota? We'll dive into more of that. As we mentioned, the national perspective on it, Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports. He's going to join us top of the 1 o'clock hour. Top of the 2 o'clock hour, Jolie Ericson has been in these scrums. He will give us his insight, his observations, and if the Colts made far more of a mess than they needed to with this quarterback situation and the realistic chances for them moving forward on the season. Then the defending champs are coming into town. An Eastern Conference Finals rematch. Pacers, Celtics tonight at Cambridge. TV voice of the Pacers, FanDuel Sports Network, Chris Denary, going to stop by bottom of the 2 o'clock hour. But the Colts, where's that margin for error between playoffs and purgatory? We'll talk about it next on Query & Company. Work on the fly a little bit here. There's another clip from
What?
our own Kevin Bowen regarding Anthony Richardson on the tap-out play itself. It just posted about a minute ago. If there's a way to isolate that audio at some point, because that was my biggest thing for Anthony Richardson after the tap-out moment is it's a tough look, but optically the only way to come back from it is to take accountability for it and to acknowledge the fact that he messed up and that can't happen and that you can't do that as a leader.
You said Kevin?
Yeah.
I don't see it.
He quote tweeted, I know we're getting in the weeds here for the listeners. I would just refresh his page, but it's just Richardson on the tap-out play, and there's a quote. Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. That is on me. Now we're going really in the weeds here. I thought there was another video attached to it. That's just a quote tweet. I'm getting old. That's all that is. Okay, so anyway, I'll just read the quote.
You have one kid.
Yeah,
Jimmy.
I know. You have one child, and all of a sudden the world crumbles around you. So here's the quote. Richardson on the tap-out play. I can't do that as a leader. Look, I don't know what Colts fans want. I don't know what the most aggressive Colts fan wants from him. But the only way back, if there is a pathway back, and I've told you flatly, I think his time to succeed with the Colts has capsized with this move. The mental aspect of it, the recovery path to it, the confidence path of it, it's an incredibly tough mountain to climb back up again. But the only way you try to entertain that is by accountability. Like, people say he's lost the locker room, or that's the speculation. I think I saw Ross Tucker nationally talk about that, how it's a decision Shane Steichen had to make. He's lost the locker room. Well, where's the path to get that back? The first step to that, one would think, is accountability. What you do after that, that's internal, in-house, let the Colts handle that. But the first one is accountability, and he's right. He can't do that as a leader. We'll get more into that as the show rolls on. But Shane Steichen says Joe Flacco gives them the best chance to win. They sit at 4-4, 33% chance by most models to make the playoffs.
Joe gives us the best chance right now going forward.
For some, we'll go optimistic here. We'll go an even more optimistic one. That is from The Athletic, that 33%, as well as ESPN. NFL.com says a 42% chance to make the playoffs.
Ooh.
Okay. Worse than a coin flip, but hey, you're right there. And if you win against the Vikings, better than a coin flip. 54% chance to make the postseason. How about that?
Wow.
You lose a little Owen Wilson there.
Yeah.
Nice. You lose 34%. Okay, so I think they lose to Minnesota and they lose to Buffalo. That puts them at 4-6. They'll beat the Jets. Joe Flacco has a nice game, 5-6. They'll lose to Detroit, 5-7. They'll beat the Patriots, 6-7. I think they lose to Denver, 6-8. They beat the Titans, 7-8. They beat the Giants, 8-8. They beat the Jaguars. It's a 9-8 campaign. You're not getting the playoffs with 9-8. That's a purgatory season for the Indianapolis Colts. Look at that schedule on your own free time. Find for me a couple more wins. Your best case, maybe I'm wrong on the Denver game, they go 10-7, okay? That's fine. That's still borderline getting yourself into the postseason. You could maybe get that 7 seed. They don't play the Chargers this year, so there's no tiebreak there. They're only a game back from the Chargers. They would need a little bit of help there. That is, by the way, taking the Bengals off the board, who even though they're a game back at the Colts, have far more faith in to make the playoffs than I do the Indianapolis Colts. I still believe in Cincinnati. I don't know that I believe in them as much as a contender as I did before, but I believe they're going to figure things out. So your doorstep is between likely the Broncos, the Chargers, yourself, and the Bengals for that 7 seed. 9-8 won't get it done. You have to go 10-7. And that is the bar now for the Indianapolis Colts. That is what this season has shifted to. Despite everything they told you in the offseason, this was a developmental year for Anthony Richardson. It was growth for him. It was opportunity for him. And it doesn't have to do with the tap out. Per Shane Steichen, it doesn't have to do with the tap out. That means they have not liked what they've seen from Anthony Richardson on the field, and they feel like that more games, despite saying at the start of the season more games was the answer, more games won't help him. People will point to me and say, well, he'll learn behind Joe Flacco, and then next year, he'll be in a better position. Will he? You're telling me that 10 games under his belt, and then an entire rest of this season and off season as a healthy scratch is going to help him when it's clear repetition is the issue? I don't agree with that. I don't know how you come back from that as a player Because now fans are already irate about the slow start currently. You're telling me, look in the mirror as a fan of the Indianapolis Colts, that a year from now, another year without the playoffs, or let's say they make it and lose in the first round, a year from now, your expectations are going to be more tempered? There's going to suddenly be less pressure on Anthony Richardson than there is right now? There's no way. That's not how fans operate. And maybe you say, well, it's not about the fans, it's about the front office. Isn't there inherently pressure on a front office to finally get an answer at quarterback instead of continuing to roll out the same backup, veteran, washed-up play that's been here the last 5 years? I would think there's some pressure there. And if you're a Colts fan that's all the way out on Anthony Richardson, while I think that is strong based on 10 games, I wouldn't hold you at fault for it. You know who I would hold at fault? Chris Ballard.
Why not Shane Steichen? If he had such a big say in this too.
I told you earlier in the segment that before I was a big defender of Shane Steichen, that's a fair question, because he, from an offensive standpoint, I like what he brings to the table. I did like his track record with other quarterbacks as a coordinator, but
if he's the one who made the big advocate towards Anthony Richardson, what shouldn't he be held accountable just as much as Chris Ballard?
This moment right now is, yes, Eddie, to answer your question, yes. But what's happening with the Colts right now for me is not about eradicating Shane Steichen from West 56th Street. If you want to do that in one fell swoop and say I'm crazy for getting rid of a general manager and not a head coach, not going to fight you on that. The issue at hand, though, and I know, Eddie, this isn't what you were trying to do, but we can't go all what about when it comes to Chris Ballard when he's had 8 seasons to figure this out. If you want to group them both together and get rid of both of them and start fully fresh, that's fine. But Ballard cannot be held away from this thing to the point that you have another scapegoat. This was his draft selection. This was his roster construction that has been the same failing roster for the last 5 years post Andrew Luck. If they are pivoting from Anthony Richardson by any stretch of the imagination, which they clearly are, Ballard has to be gone by season's end. I don't care if they make the playoffs this year. That is not a salve grace to Ballard because they've made the playoffs once underneath him and they lost to the Bills. So I'm not here for that. I'm not here for this idea that they are, and I guess Ballard was here as well, Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong, when they lost to Kansas City, correct? They beat Houston, they lost to Kansas City. That was
yes.
So okay. So they've had 2 trips. This is not suddenly they put Flacco in, Ballard gets a pass. No, this was Ballard's pick. This was Ballard's opportunity to find a franchise quarterback. And if his argument for him was he needs to play, and now there's an about face by the organization, that is a failure. That is a misdiagnosis in the draft process. If what Eddie Tinfoil had it earlier, that behind the scenes, Anthony Richardson is struggling and not putting in the work in. Again, I haven't seen that. Eddie hasn't seen that. You're just trying to piece together this puzzle for how the Colts rationally got to where they did today. If that happened, it's a failure on Chris Ballard because you are supposed to be able to evaluate what the negative aspects are of that player.
Another element as to why that would be a failure on Chris Ballard is if you are aware of this and you believe that your locker room and your culture can elevate him to become a better pro and, follow the right steps, then that's another part of the failure.
It's a swing and a miss, a swing and a miss, and a swing and a miss for this organization. And for them, regardless of how this season goes, if the book just closed on Anthony Richardson and they are transitioning to a win now mode where they get to give the fans a little bit of false hope with one more playoff appearance, if they're able to get that, that is not enough to absolve Chris Ballard of the colossal miss this would be if you're wrong on Anthony Richardson. Nobody is above evaluation from ownership or fans as long as he has. And if this indeed is the end of the Anthony Richardson story in Indianapolis, so too should it be end of that story for Chris Ballard as general manager of the Indianapolis Colts. We still got plenty to get to today. Charles McDonald's going to give us the national perspective on all of this. Where do the Colts go from here? Realistically, what's their playoff outlook like now? As well, Jolie Ericson has been in all these media availabilities today. Will join us top of the 2 o'clock hour. And then Eastern Conference Finals rematch tonight at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, 7 o'clock. Pacers, Celtics, TV voice over at FanDuel Sports Network. Chris Denary going to join us, get us set for that as well. But Charles McDonald, Yahoo Sports next. Eddie with a little rush. Perhaps the Colts have rush their decision making, as we always have a theme within a theme of our shows here. It's Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5.
What's with the smirk? I thought it was a good one.
I think you're very crafty, and you always make me chuckle every now and again, Eddie, especially in dark times like these with the current state of the Indianapolis Colts. Charles McDonald going to join us here in just a second, but he mentioned this on Twitter, or at least interacted with it, and I would like to further clarify things. So again, Shane Steichen's press conference today, reacting to his decision to bench Anthony Richardson, bring Joe Flacco in. And we've seen variations of the following quote as questions continued to be asked to Shane Steichen in regards to the permanence of this decision. Kevin Bowen had mentioned that for Shane Steichen, on if this is a 1 week benching for Anthony Richardson. No, Joe will be our guy going forward. Nate Atkins reporting, Shane Steichen asked if Anthony Richardson will start a game for the Colts again. That would be great. We'll see. James Boyd also reporting, Shane Steichen, if Joe Flacco is a starting quarterback for the rest of the season. Right now he is, yes. Follow up to that. Joe is our starting quarterback going forward, yes. I've given my observations on this. There'll still be more time for this throughout the day, but Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports joins us. Charles, welcome to NFL Purgatory, where decisions of development and potentially winning now, whatever that means, take shape on a yearly basis. I know you've had time to digest this along with everything else that you cover throughout the National Football League. But let's start with that. From the clips that you've seen or just the text bubbles that you've seen from Shane Steichen out of this press conference, do you think definitively the Colts have now married their season to Joe Flacco, barring injury, as their starting quarterback?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think you can really come back from this, and especially with what he's saying, you're saying everything but what you want to say, which is, yeah, Joe Flacco's our starting quarterback for the rest of the season because we're not satisfied with where Anthony is right now, which is kind of crazy because you knew that this was going to be a process getting him up to speed. So to bail this early feels a little rash to me. I don't know how much of it was maybe players not really liking the idea of him, going to take himself out for a play in a game. To me, that seems like a pretty big overreaction. I don't think he was quite as bad as 10 for 32 would suggest, but man, it's tough to just keep going back to, we can't complete 50% of our passes. We've got one of the worst passing games of football. And we've already seen glimpses that it doesn't have to be necessarily that bad. So if I was a team out there that needed a young quarterback, I'd be calling to see what the asking price would be for Anthony Richardson, because I don't think that you can have these quotes come out and bench him in such a loud way where it just kind of feels over, which is, at least for this season, it feels over. Maybe you can get back in there and he's got a chance to compete for the job next year. But for now, everything that they're saying, everything that with how they position themselves means, it looks done, which is, like I said, it's just kind of crazy because, not even Bryce Young got the hook pulled on him that fast. I think Anthony Richardson has shown more to Bryce Young. This is all just moved in a way that I think is it feels a little dysfunctional, but at the same time, they've made this decision and they're moving forward with Flacco, which also means if that's the case, you have to draft another quarterback next year because it's not like Flacco's going to be the long-term guy. I mean, he's almost 40, so it's kind of a bad spot that they put themselves in where they're not going to learn more about where Anthony Richardson can be in this league while also not really trying to put themselves in position to go get another guy next year. I think they've just they've attached themselves to the mediocrity for whatever reasons.
I've gone on record saying that if the Anthony Richardson pick is a failure, which I'm with you in that benching him in this manner, there's enough precedent around history of this league that he's not coming back from this. And if he does, it's not in a Colts uniform. Maybe the Geno Smith change of scenery things happens in a year or two and he has a career revitalization, but I think it's over for him to succeed with the Colts. If that is the case, if you and I are correct on that, and it's deemed a failure in Indianapolis, I know you're an outside voice on this, but Chris Ballard's record is what it is. He is 58, 64, and 1 to this point in the season with 2 playoff appearances, a 1-2 record, and no division titles. And this was his guy that he drafted. I'm with you that the Colts need to take another quarterback at some point in the next season or two if Richardson's over, because Flacco, like, you feel less optimistic certainly about Flacco than you do a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who at that point in his career is still supposed to be a Super Bowl contending quarterback. That's not what Flacco is. When you look at the tenure of Ballard, the tenure of other general managers around the National Football League, I'm with you. They have to take another QB at some point. Why should or should not Colts fans trust Chris Ballard to be the one to make that decision?
I mean, I don't really understand. And this is going to sound brash and mean, but I kind of don't understand how he's still in the position that he's in.
I'm with you.
I mean, dude, you can only spin the Andrew Luck excuse for so long. That happened a long time ago at this point when he, obviously, as all you guys know, when he retired abruptly before.
5 years is a long time. It's a long time in the NFL.
5 years is a long time. So at some point, you kind of just have to look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, this is not working. It's not done, or the job's not getting done here. So I don't really see why you should let him oversee another rebuild. It's not like the quarterback is the only issue with the Colts right now. Like they still have room to improve, obviously, before they can get back to like AFC title contenders. So he's been GM there for a long time. They haven't really accomplished all that much. They haven't really accomplished anything since Andrew Luck left, outside of like the quick little Phillip Rivers playoff appearance where he played well for them and then it was over. I would be surprised if he was still the GM next year, but at the same time I wouldn't be, because it's gotten to this point, right? And we all know, like, whether it comes to Chris Ballard's job security or a quarterback decision, as much as Steichen can say the owner had no involvement in it. Come on, we know who runs this team. Like, he's not going to let anyone just sit there and make decisions that he won't be a part of. So that's part of the reason why Chris Ballard still has a job. And I don't know like how much influence Jim Irsay had on this decision, but after everything that we've seen, including like the hiring of Jeff Saturday on a whim, you can't rule it out that he has been involved in this decision in some sort of way, whether it's small, like a suggestion, or heavy-handed, like, no, this is what you're about to do.
Eddie, can I get the tinfoil hat back on me, please, real quick? So we suggested this yesterday, and we talked to a couple of Colts beat reporters yesterday, and they said they didn't think it was insane. Like, it's not quite tinfoil territory, because tinfoil territory is something that's not plausible. I'm with you in that regard, though, about Jim Irsay's influence here. But I'm choosing with the press conference, fair or not, to take Shane Steichen at his word. And he said a lot of things in the presser today that seem head-scratching to believe that it didn't impact their decision. For example, he said Richardson tapping out had nothing to do with the decision. And he also said that Jim Irsay had no impact on the decision. He said he spoke with him, but it was Shane Steichen's decision. Now, moving away from that for a second, because my producer Eddie Garrison does a great job for us on a number of different spots here on The Fan, brought this up last segment. And this is a part where I go back and forth with it, because generally the rule of thumb is you want a clean slate across the board when you're bringing in general manager and head coach. And they didn't do that with the Ballard aspect of it. Ballard kind of got a free pass on things, right? They let him stay and survive everything that just happened with Frank Reich and the Jeff Saturday chaos. And now here we're back still where you have question marks with Chris Ballard, and Shane Steichen's in year 2? Mm-hmm. Eddie brought up the point of, what about Shane Steichen being involved in this selection of Anthony Richardson? Where is the blame for him? My side of it is, okay, if you want to fire them both, fine. I don't know that that's the answer, but this can't be another scapegoat for Ballard of, okay, no, get rid of Steichen and Ballard stays. Where's the dichotomy of that relationship, coach, GM, and in this situation, one's been there 2 years, one has been there upwards of 7 seasons. where does the blame result if this is indeed a failure with Anthony Richardson?
I don't know, because to me the biggest thing is just quitting before you even know what this
Right.
is. I mean, he's played 10 games. So like that's the part that I can't get over. And if you're like divvying up like the percentages of who was involved in making the pick, obviously Steichen had to be involved somewhat, because the idea was, you ran like this perfect offense for Jalen Hurts. What if we got someone who was physically much more talented than Jalen Hurts? So like whether it was his choice or him being there like influencing his decision based on what he did in Philadelphia, then to me that makes him, part of the reason why you would make that pick. Obviously Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay have a whole lot of influence there. So I think everyone kind of gets an equal, slice of the decision-making, pie chart when it comes to the pick of him. And I still don't think that was necessarily a bad process. Like, this part is the bad process to me, where, you look at how he started last year, it looked really promising. And then even like in the early Texans game this year, like there's still a bunch of plays that he's making where you can see the future where he's like a dynamite quarterback for this team. So just to bail at like the first sign of a rough patch, I mean, like the first sign of like a really true rough patch where you're like, this looks a little shaky. That's where I think you have to start getting concerned about like where the operation actually is, because you knew it was going to take a long time or potentially a long time for him to get ready. Unfortunately, you didn't get to see much of his rookie year because he got injured, and now before you even get to the mid portion of this season, or before you get to the part where you're really fighting for the division, you're pulling him. It just seems so irrational to me that I just have a hard time, like coming to the conclusion on whose fault it is. But we know that this owner has been involved with rash decisions in the past, so it's hard not to just kind of follow the tea leaves and see that he's got some influence here somewhere, because otherwise it doesn't really make any sense. Like, do you think the Colts are going to win a Super Bowl? No way. They're not in that class. So why not just see what you have in Anthony Richardson? Because if he is good enough to reach that potential, that is a quarterback that's good enough to win a Super Bowl. Now you're just starting with Joe Flacco, and you're going to rip the Band-Aid off and then start over in the offseason. That line of events doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me unless they're just totally done with Anthony Richardson, and it's probably for a whole lot of reasons. I mean, even to say that him taking himself out, well, I think it's overblown. Clearly the players in that locker room didn't think it was overblown. Clearly Shane Steichen didn't think it was overblown, because he spoke about it after the game when he was asked about it, and he more or less said that that's not the standard that we hold our players to. So it just seems like a whole lot of things, which is unfortunate, because I still think there's a chance that he figures it out as a quarterback.
Charles McDonald is our guest, covers all things NFL for Yahoo Sports. Let's look at that element of Joe Flacco now, and we'll get back to Richardson in a second, but they believe, this again, a quote from Shane Steichen's presser, that he gives the best chance to win moving forward. You just said it a little bit there. I've acknowledged it today. Win what exactly is a mystery to me. You are out on any tiebreak with the Texans. They have a big lead on you in overall standings and in the AFC South. And even though the playoff picture is murky right now, and the Colts, I guess the glass half full look as it is, hey, they're not in the Dolphins, Browns, Raiders, Jaguars, Patriots, Jets, or Titans boat. They're there with the Bengals, and I guess in the thick of it. But in your observation, I guess a two-part question here. What is a winning season for them, a successful season for them with this decision? What does that look like? And if that answer is a playoff berth, where do you match them up in terms of whether it's schedule, whether it's roster, whether it's legitimacy of aspirations with the likes of the Chargers, the Steelers, the Broncos, and the Bengals for one of those last two playoff spots?
Well, I mean, look, they probably have just enough to get into the playoffs, and especially, and see, this is why I was kind of against playoff expansion. As much as I enjoy watching an extra game, I mean, come on, we're talking about a Colts team by Joe Flacco. That's a playoff team. Like it's not serious. So yeah, like I think you can compete with the Chargers, you can compete with the Bengals. Maybe you can hold off the Dolphins, even though like the 2-5 Dolphins still have a shot to make the playoffs. Come on, let's cut it back down to 6. But once you get into the playoffs, you're like the chances that you catch up to the Texans and you would have to surpass them because they won both games. You would have to finish with more wins than them. They already have 2 more wins than you as you're undergoing a quarterback change. Seems a little unlikely. You're talking about going on the road to Buffalo, on the road to Pittsburgh, on the road to Baltimore, on the road to Kansas City. Like, what are we talking about here? They get smashed in all of those games. So I don't really understand what, like you said, win what? Like, what are we trying to win here? And honestly, I don't really know if Joe Flacco makes it more likely that you actually get to the playoffs.
Like it's a marginal increase, if anything. Like we're not talking about all of a sudden that, especially with what's in front of them. Like look at their next couple of games: Minnesota, Buffalo, Detroit in the mix there. Like this isn't exactly a cakewalk for them any way you decide to paint it.
Right, and like they play Denver soon too. Denver has arguably the best defense in football. So I don't think they have much of a chance to do anything once they get to the playoffs. I mean, getting there is certainly possible because the AFC playoff field I think is a little weaker than people expected. But like they still have a tough sledding for the rest of the regular season, and then obviously once you get there, what are we talking about? This team's like they're not winning the Super Bowl, and they would be lucky to win a game in the playoffs as they're currently constructing. So I think all of this just feels really, really short-sighted in a way that would cause me concern if I was a Colts fan for like what the immediate future looks like, because they don't really seem to have a cohesive plan as far as like building out the future of this team. I think just pulling the ripcord on Anthony Richardson before you even know what that fully is, and then taking another quarterback next year. I mean, sure, you can do that, but to me, this is just punting on having any sort of meaningful season the rest of the way.
Charles McDonald joins us of Yahoo Sports on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Charles, this is and I've done this a lot. Understandably, it's much better for me nowadays. My childhood days of Chiefs fandom were what they were, of just quarterback circles that the Colts are living through now. And now everything's wonderful and rainbows and butterflies, and it's a great time, and just Super Bowls are a mainstay. But for you as a Falcons fan, you are still in that mode of feeling things out for a quarterback and trying to build and have lived what Colts fans are going through right now. I know they were drafted differently, but just with circumstance of things, Desmond Ridder would be an example of quarterbacks that were given the keys and then the keys were taken away from them. And you've seen how this movie ends. I think Anthony Richardson, a better prospect than Ridder, certainly, and I think he has a chance to have a much better NFL career than what's currently happening with Ridder right now. But for you, if we're entertaining the idea that he has not been shot as a Colts member, that there is still hope to revive this, what does it look like for you? Because the way they're talking right now, it would seem that Joe Flacco is the starter unless Richardson gets hurt. I guess they could always do an about face if they fall off a cliff, and then it's like, okay, Anthony, here's the confidence back, man. The season's over now. Go play. What is the outline? Because if it's next year and this fan base is already as irritated as they are about the lack of starts, another 365 days isn't going to solve things. It's going to have a bigger gap of a problem than you already have.
No, if they're starting Flacco right now, I would assume that this is just over.
Yeah.
Like if I was a team, I would be trying to trade for him.
Charles, that's what I said yesterday. The deadline's in 6 days, and I was only halfway being flippant about that. You mentioned it earlier, like if you're out, you might as well. I mean, I guess you're not selling high by any stretch of the imagination, but like,
right.
You might as well.
You're going to have a bunch of teams chomping at the bit because what they're seeing is everything that's happened in the past 3 days, from the game to the press conferences to the decision. Like his value has just plummeted on the trade market. Honestly, probably to the point where it wouldn't make sense for the Colts to let him go at this point. But dude, if you're a team that needs a developmental starter, like I don't know, the Rams or maybe another team like
the Raiders,
49ers, the 49ers, and you're just trying to add some competition. Yeah, why not? I mean, Trey Lance got traded for a third-round pick. We've seen more from Anthony Richardson than we ever saw from Trey Lance. So I think that there's a chance you could maybe get something of value, but the value is torpedoed at this point. And partially is that's due to the Colts' fault. Like, if you were able to kind of finesse this a little bit better throughout the week with the press conferences, maybe you could have gotten something of big value for Anthony Richardson. But now you probably just have to wait and hold him until the offseason, which is like you're just kind of creating a logjam, because now we're talking about a scenario where he's potentially on the roster when you draft another quarterback, or maybe you trade him after the season. But I just can't kind of get over how bad they've bungled all of this. Like, it just doesn't really seem like it had to be done in this way, and it just makes me question, like, who is actually pushing down the decisions here, because just from like an actual on the field developmental standpoint, what can we achieve standpoint, what's realistic for us to achieve standpoint, benching him doesn't really make any sense. Like, it's not like it's not like what the Steelers are doing, right? Where you have Justin Fields and we could be a little bit better, so we're going to put in Russell Wilson, who, like, as of 2 years ago was traded for a big trade. It's not like Joe Flacco, who was literally basically out of the league until he got picked up by the Browns last year and then was able to go on that run and get into the playoffs. But even with that Browns team, last year they had the best defense in football. The Colts are not quite there. I think that's fair to say.
Yes.
So you're just kind of you're trying to go like 9-8, I guess, and maybe that's good for Shane Steichen's job prospects. But as far as getting this Colts team to the next level, you're just kind of choosing to go in cruise control for no reason.
Charles McDonald joined us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. You can find his work, of course, with Yahoo Sports. Charles, you mentioned short-sighted feel with this decision. What do you say to those that bring up the thought, which again, Shane Steichen said that the tap out had nothing to do with it. That's what he's publicly going with. True or not, that's what he's telling people, is that Anthony Richardson tapping out did not impact the decision. What do you say to those that bring up the idea of veterans on this roster, people that signed up on, like, the way the Colts constructed things, 2- and 3-year deals with a specific window in their mind to contend, that either A, the locker room was lost, or B, these are guys that have incentives in their contracts to make the playoffs or win the playoff game and get a little bit of bonus in that regard. Where do you say to people that bring that point up, and where does that balance between short-sightedness of the long-term health of the franchise versus the idea of keeping continuity when they're a franchise that claims to be all about culture? Well,
I mean, to me, this is like a larger a conversation on football culture in general, because the further that I've been able to, like, remove myself from actually being a player, you start to realize, like, how silly some of, like, the warrior aspect of it is, where, dude, we're talking about a play on 3rd and goal from the 23-yard line that he subbed himself out for. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, what are we going to do? Just, like, sit there and run like a bubble screen or hand the ball off and then try to kick a field goal? Like, what are we actually missing here? And I think that, when you get in the thick of it, that perspective gets lost, because him coming out for that one play, like that's not why you lose that game. That's not why, that's not really why anything bad happened in that game. That's not the reason why it happened. So I think that, to a degree, like, even the players themselves who are there, they lose perspective on what actually matters in terms of, like, the impact that things can do. But at the same time, if that's what they all think, then that's what they all think. And if they think that was, like, an egregious boundary that you can't come back from, and emotionally that's the standard that they're going to set for Anthony Richardson, then, yeah, he crossed the line that I guess he can't get back from. That seems a little bit rash to me. It seems a little bit ridiculous, but you do have to respect the rules of the locker room to a degree. And
do you think optically it would have helped all parties involved if the approach here was, this is disciplinary, or this is disciplinary, we're benching him for 2 games or however many games because we can't have that in the locker room? Do you think that would have been adequate enough versus the stance of Joe Flacco is our quarterback the remainder of the year.
I mean, even suspension sounds kind of crazy for like one play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, but like I get the optics side of it where something has to be done. Like, would that have made it more palatable in your mind?
Probably a little bit. But at the end of the day, the culture is set by the players, and the players have decided that was a breach of their trust. Me personally, I think it's a little short-sighted when you're talking about a non-impactful play. Really, at the end of the day, a play that's almost impossible to convert for, like even like the Patrick Mahomes of the world. You're talking about 3rd and 23. We got one shot, no first down, it's a touchdown or nothing. That's a pretty tough spot to be in. So, but he did this to himself. Now, where I think he messed up is telling the truth.
Yes.
To the reporters. Yeah, just say your shoulder pads. My helmet was messed up. I felt it in my cleat that didn't feel right. It's 3rd and 23. So
literally anything. Literally anything
besides to tell you the truth. I was tired. Now, Anthony, why would you say that? Football fans and football reporters can't be trusted with the truth. You got to lie to us. Make us feel better about the decisions you're making. I didn't care, but I can tell from my Twitter mentions when I tweeted that I didn't care that a lot of people do care for whatever reason. So we can't be trusted. Just say your helmet was messed up. You have to fix your shoulder pad buckle and get back out there.
Charles, anything you'd like to plug on the way out the door? Find your work at Yahoo Sports, of course, on Twitter at 4verts.
Check out our podcast, Football 301. Me and Nate Tice, Matt Harmon. We're on twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's been fun to get in that launch, and check out everything we're doing over at Yahoo Sports.
Appreciate you as always, my man. Hope to talk to you as the season goes on.
All right, see ya.
That is Charles McDonald, again, of Yahoo Sports. You can follow him on Twitter at 4verts. He mentioned a lot there, including the short-sighted nature of the Indianapolis Colts. Are they putting short-term success for a goal that seems minuscule ahead of the long-term outlook of the franchise? We'll get into that when we come back on Query & Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. That was Anthony Richardson speaking with James Boyd of The Athletic, involved in that media scrum with Anthony Richardson's availability today. Reactions from West 56th Street with the Indianapolis Colts electing to bench rookie quarterback Anthony Richardson for Joe Flacco for the remainder of the year. But it'd be great if Richardson could be the Colts quarterback again for right now. A lot of caveats at the end of some of these statements from Shane Steichen in regards to what the future actually holds for this team. Another question that was asked by James Boyd to Shane Steichen was if he thinks his team is unified on his decision to bench Anthony Richardson in favor of Joe Flacco. Shane Steichen, I can't speak for our team. Look, I understand that I didn't play in the NFL, but generally, in most walks of life, there is a hierarchy to how business operates. Generally, there is a superior officer or a boss, or in this case, a head coach that would be the face of the team. Sure, you're going to have players that represent that, but the coach, I would say, generally speaking, is the
Like how we're the president and the CEO of this company.
Exactly. How you and I have somehow high-level Fortune 500 positions within Querian Company. Exactly. So I can't speak for our team. Isn't the non-answer that I think Shane Steichen might have thought it was? It adds more disarray to this situation of, did the Colts really think this through? Or did they rush into a decision? Steichen says Jim Irsay wasn't involved. I guess you're taking him at his word on that. There's a lot of comments made by Shane Steichen today that you have to parse what is true and what is coach speak and what is someone trying to deflect and take some of the microscopes away from this organization right now. But you can't tell me that Shane Steichen doesn't have the pulse of his locker room, because it should be a unified front. If you're worried about the locker room being lost to begin with, which some Colts fans are, I would think that the players on the roster are behind the move. Because Anthony Richardson tapping out is such a cardinal sin of professional sports that the locker room is shook up to the point that a change is needed. Well, I would hope it's a unifying front. But if you're going to deflect the question, it then raises further questions of, are all the Colts on board with this? Everybody wants to win, but not everybody on this roster is in that camp of players that have bonuses attached to it and want to win now. I don't know how many people realistically, and to be fair, the Colts did not bring in hardly any outside talent this offseason outside of the draft, and nobody through free agency. It was mainly done in-house. I don't know how you re-up with this team going into this season thinking that they are going to contend for anything legitimately. And let's say that you held on to the belief that they're a play away against the Texans. And they're right there. And if Anthony Richardson develops ahead of schedule, he could be better than C.J. Stroud. I don't believe that necessarily, but let's say you told yourself that as a Colt. And you look at Joe Flacco, who was left for dead a couple of years ago and winds up with a revitalization in Cleveland for a couple games. But it ends the same way those stories always end, with the veteran quarterback eventually meeting a roster that has a better quarterback and that's better put together as a team than you, and the season ends. That's where this story's headed, by the way, if they somehow make the playoffs. But you're a Colt that signed with this team. You knew what you signed up for. Nobody sold you this bill of goods on a team that was going to be a contender for the Super Bowl. You can't be mad after the fact when it's not suddenly parades and banners and rainbows and butterflies when the rookie quarterback is doing what you were told would happen. which is he's struggling. And again, you go back and look at the tape against Houston, the numbers will tell you he had an awful day. There's enough drops, there's enough play calling issues, and there's enough situationally set up for failure bad football where I don't view that as a horrific day with no growth for Anthony Richardson. I viewed it as a day where, hey, if a couple other things bounce your way, that's a positive step forward for him. The one thing I didn't mention there, by the way, of how he was let down, was pass protection. Anthony Richardson, with the way Shane Steichen has been calling plays, has had to think on the fly, react quickly, occasionally bail on pockets, and try to adapt to fire around him situations because of opposing defenses. Eddie, why is Anthony Richardson, in your mind, if the pocket collapses around him and he needs to think quick on his feet, pardon the pun, why is Anthony Richardson, in theory, equipped to extend plays and get away from disaster pocket protection scenarios?
Because he's mobile.
Where would mobility rank in Joe Flacco's arsenal of weapons?
At the bottom.
Okay. That's still there. Pass protection failing is still there, and now your scapegoat to get away from it, which is mobility, is gone. What happens if Flacco gets hurt? Where do you go from there? Back to Anthony Richardson?
I mean, the offensive line hasn't been the issue at all, in my opinion.
It hasn't consistently, but it certainly was on Sunday.
Well,
there were moments where they failed him on Sunday.
Is it that or him just holding on to the ball too long?
Which is, again, if you want to pivot to that, I would blame it on schematic and play calling and where he's set up for failure.
Perhaps.
It's a combination of all of it, but the point is, if pass protection has taken a step back, Flacco's not a benefit in the checkbox of things that are now better by him. I mentioned players in the locker room that have bonuses at stake, perhaps, that are wanting to win now. What about the rest of this young core? What about the message that's being set there? We'll look at that. Plus, we'll get our local angle and full-scale boots-on-the-ground reporting from Jolie Ericson of the Indy Star, where his takeaways are after the Colts firmly commit. A lot of caveats with Shane Steichen's statements, but firmly commit that Joe Flacco is a starting quarterback moving forward. It's Query and Company on the Fan. Still to come on Query and Company. In about 13 minutes from now, Jolie Ericson of the Indy Star. He's been in all the media scrums and all the press conferences today with Shane Steichen speaking on the organization's decision to bench Anthony Richardson for Joe Flacco and how he gives them the best chance to win. John Searing writes in on Twitter, if the veterans behind closed doors want to change, how do you fault Steichen for looking Buckner, Kenny Moore, Michael Pittman Jr. in the eye and not losing the locker room? Look, I understand that element of this. The whole season is short-sighted. Discipline can be handed out in a wide variety of ways. My argument on Monday was Shane Steichen needs to address the media, which he did before the benching, that this can't happen, and that they've talked to Anthony about it. And if I'm Anthony, both to the players and to the media, he's at least done half of that. You're acknowledging fault, acknowledging you were in the wrong for tapping out, and acknowledging that he has to be better in that regard. But this is your future. You've already put the eggs in the basket. You've already put all the chips in, as it were, for, not going to get it twice, I understand, for Anthony Richardson as your franchise quarterback. At least Chris Ballard did. Any sane run organization would realize that's what's happened, and if this is a failure of Richardson, Ballard would be gone. I don't think that's going to happen, if I'm being honest with you, because he's survived everything to this point. I don't know what the rock bottom moment is for the Colts looking at Chris Ballard as your general manager to make them make a change.
It should have been 2022.
Indeed. And it wasn't. You could make the argument, if this goes the way I think it's going to, this should be it. But if it didn't happen in 22, I look around and I say, there is something about Chris Ballard the Colts like as an organization. It's not winning, clearly, because that hasn't happened in 5 years.
He's a blue chip GM, Jimmy.
Yep. But anyway, in regards to that comment about veterans behind, look, I'm fine with that. I understand it. Whether it is in a locker room or in life, if you have disgruntled employees and you feel like that the fresh young gun on the scene is getting special treatment or is not being held accountable the same way, you have a right to complain about it. But the decision to go fully to Flacco leaves you in this vacuum of uncertainty going into 2025. Joe Flacco only has a career resurgence because of an opportunity in Cleveland. He's going to be 40 on January 16th. Think about the short list of quarterbacks that age that are still in the league, let alone still leading franchises. I understand that all of the whole TB12 Tom Brady mentality has reset the mindset of fan bases and maybe franchises to some extent of, oh, you can play well into your 40s. You'll be fine. Aaron Rodgers, by every account, is a quarterback better equipped going into 2024 to lead a team to a franchise than Joe Flacco, and it's not close. That's not going to suddenly get better in a year's time. So Flacco's another Band-Aid. What are you doing with Richardson? What message does this send to your young players if the answer for one mistake, and Eddie brought up maybe it's more than that, but if one mistake, instead of a chance for accountability, it's no, give us the keys back, your season's done. Because I get it, Shane Steichen has to make a stand as a head coach, but it doesn't do anything to change the long-term prospects of this franchise. They're going to maybe squeak into the playoffs because the AFC is a muddling mess for the 6 and the 7 seed. They'll probably draw Houston in that scenario, and they will get bounced. And then you're back to square one. But hey, maybe the tides have turned. You have a veteran now under center, and he gives you allegedly the best chance to win. We haven't heard from him yet. This from Joe Flacco a little earlier in the last hour or so, speaking to the media about all of this.
I know that when I was that young, there's no chance that I would have been able to have the perspective and just the right head on my shoulders to to handle it and take it the right way. But now, being, this my 17th year, I do have that perspective. So if you can kind of give any of that to him in terms of just, this doesn't have to be a negative thing. There's a lot of positives on his end that can come from this. Like I said, he's very young with a bright future, and there's plenty of guys that come into this league and don't play right away. Now, I know this is a little bit different because it feels like you're getting something taken away from you. And like I said, if I was as young as he was, there's no chance I would have taken it the right way right off the bat. But I do really believe there's a lot of positives. I mean, look, there's a bunch of guys around the league that haven't played right as they come in the league, or have gotten second or third chances as they've kind of matured and grown a little bit. And I think there's a lot of advantages of being able to remove yourself a little bit and watch from a distance and learn and do those things. And I think, I think that's probably, not to talk for the Colts and Shane, but you would think that's part of the thought process of at least a little bit is to try to help him out.
Joe Flacco is a wise veteran. I like him a lot. I don't have a problem with Joe Flacco, the person. I don't fault Joe Flacco at all for this situation. He's a veteran quarterback. He wouldn't be in the league if he still didn't want to play a little bit, or at least be around the game. But he couched the key difference between the value of learning with the ramifications of getting the keys and then having them taken away. That movie just doesn't work out in today's NFL.
That sounded like a guy that was admitting, without admitting, that he doesn't feel like Anthony's ready.
And maybe he believes
he shouldn't have been playing.
I would agree with you on that, and maybe he believes that. Here's the problem. The organization didn't. They flat out didn't. They believed internally and externally that he was ready to go. It's malpractice in that regard to put him in that situation if there were conflicting opinions on it, or if they somehow rushed to judgment on it like it appears they did here. But it's different than those other examples that Flacco outlines where you get to learn and grow, and it can be good for a young quarterback. He did all that last year, first of all, which, by the way, they didn't start last year with that mentality. The mentality for the last 2 seasons has been live reps for him. That's what's going to help him grow. You can't then hide underneath this safe shelter of, no, he can grow behind Joe Flacco, and that's the better move. That's an admission of wrongdoing in your operation of managing your young quarterback. You can paint it however you want. That's all it is. It is saying you miscalculated on Anthony Richardson being ready or not. Because everybody wants to say, no, he tapped out. No, he lost the locker room. Shane Steichen's not saying any of those things. Shane Steichen has said on 2 occasions to the media the tap out had nothing to do with it, and that Joe Flacco gives him the best chance to win, which was not the MO for this season. I could be on board with it more if all of 2024's offseason was about fine-tuning this roster to contend this year. It's not. All they're left with is an outside chance at a 7 or 6 seed in the playoff that only exists because of expansion, and a one-way ticket back to purgatory. Jolie Ericson next. little free falling by Eddie Garrison. Certainly feels that way. You know the deal by now. Colts bench Joe Flacco. If you haven't, Eddie, honestly, if you haven't known that the Colts benched Anthony Richardson for Joe Flacco.
I just don't know how you wouldn't know.
But also.
No, that's only applying to the program.
Okay. Well, it's 2 o'clock now if you're just now joining us.
Where have you been?
All right. Thank you, Eddie. That's all I wanted there. It is Query and Company on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. Jimmy Cook in the solo seat with Eddie Garrison guiding us through the afternoon. Jake Query will be back with us next week, enjoying a little bit of hard-earned vacation time. The chaos continues at West 56th Street. There's a lot of different aspects of being on the beat and the way things are answered that I want to get to, and we do that with Jolie Ericson of the Indy Star.
That is a true story. Look it up. That's a true story.
There's Jake all of a sudden. I still think if we just leave the laughter isolated itself, it's better because then we have to go on and rehash said story, but we won't do that here because Jake's not here to take us down that path. But Joel joins us. I'm sure he wishes he was laughing as carefree as he was that visit versus what he's had to deal with now. Joel, Eddie says that the words keep climbing. How long before this becomes a book? At which case, is it Richardson done? ? The story of the day everything changed at West 56. Is that the headline there?
It's a bunch of different. Like the thing is, it's a bunch of words over a bunch of different headlines. So you'd have to do like one of those compiling things where you just take everything that's got my name on it and squash it together. And yeah, I think the headlines. But speaking of, by the way, if we're getting to pick where we go, can I be where Jake is? Where's Jake?
Jake is in Scotland/Ireland for the next week.
Oh, yeah. Can I be where Jake is? That sounds like fun.
It sounds like a much happier place where Guinness is all around.
How did he know to schedule it this week?
Jake Query is a man of many talents, many quirks. His ability to read the room of when to get out of Dodge before chaos arrives is a skill that I don't think either of us will ever be able to possess. Look, here's the mystery I need solved from you. I've seen 3 or 4 different quotes from a lot of beat writers that I trust, yourself included, about Shane Steichen addressing this being a 1-week decision or not. I've seen him say, yes, he's our starter. I've seen right now. What's your takeaway from this? Is this permanent or is this a temporary thing?
My takeaway is it's permanent. Like the right now piece of it is, I think, just him leaving open the door that, this is the NFL and things could go badly. But like for the most part, when we asked, the fans own Kevin Bowen asked, if it was a 1-week thing, and his response was, no, he's the quarterback going forward. He's the quarterback. And I think the other piece of that is, like, when we asked him what's the plan for Anthony Richardson to become the starter again, he didn't really have much of an answer, which I think also tells you that in his mind, this is a permanent decision for this season.
How crazy is the idea that he's dealt between now and next Tuesday? Which is the trade deadline for those that don't know.
I feel like, because he did say, he said, we're not giving up on Anthony. I know that's been the kind of the message from the Colts. And there's a part of me that feels like they're not ready to admit defeat that quite like that yet. But also they benched him and they don't have a plan necessarily, or at least a stated plan to get him back in the starting lineup. So, the other thing is I don't know who would come calling for him before the deadline. That's more of an off-season deal if you're going to get a project quarterback.
Yeah, you look around, like maybe the Raiders or the Rams or somebody come to mind, but you'd be correct in that it would be a project piece, and that's probably more for the offseason. Jolie Ericson, our guest, covers the Colts for the Indy Star. What do you make of Shane Steichen kind of deflecting, saying that he can't speak for the entire team in regards to if this was a unified decision?
He talked to the leadership council. I don't think he talked to all 53 guys. I think that's what he's trying to allude to there. I'm sorry to cut you off real quick. Can you clarify that for me? And maybe this is just an area of ignorance for me. You mentioned the leadership council. Is that captains? Is that a specific group of Colts? Who's in that realm? It's more than just the captains. I don't know the exact number, but it's more than just the captains. He said you try to gauge the locker room, but it didn't sound like he had a concrete number. It sounded like they went through and I know it's election season. I don't think they voted on it. But he did say that he consulted them a
exit
little
poll.
Yeah.
And in terms of Anthony Richardson in the media scrum, the way he responded to everything, I can only go off of the clips and the text that's out there from firsthand account being there. Would you grade him taking accountability? Where would you grade that at in terms of his response to the tap out and this entire situation? Is it a guy that is obviously upset but taking accountability in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely got his attention. He mentioned a whole host of different things. He knows that the tap out was wrong. He's generally got I think if someone's going to watch the videos and look for him to be just really, really down and kicking himself, that's not really his general orientation and hasn't been since he got here. He kind of tried to strike a hopeful tone. But he said he kind of alluded to, needing to get better at preparation, needing to get better, focusing in more, that kind of thing. But it has to have his attention, right? You essentially were given the starting job when they drafted you number 4 a year and a half ago, and it's been yours since then, and now it's not.
I guess I was more looking at, because I don't expect him to show a ton of emotion necessarily, but would there have been arrogance? Would there have been oh, I don't understand what's going on here? Or did he carry himself as the type that, even if the Colts don't want to address it this way, this is clearly a disciplinary move, be it from the tap out, be it from preparation, be it from whatever. This is clearly a move they think is beneficial for him.
No, the stuff he said about he doesn't know exactly what led to the decision. From the way he characterized it, Steichen met with him and said he was going with Joe, and there really wasn't much of an explanation. But he didn't say it in a pejorative way or a criticizing way.
I know I'm asking you to read tea leaves there, but that
Mm-hmm.
caught my attention as well when he says that he didn't necessarily explain it. I know I'm asking you to add more words to him there, but did that come off as it was a private conversation he didn't want to reveal, or that genuinely you don't think that it was explained to him why he's benched?
Hard to tell. I mean, I would think he's been so open, sometimes to his detriment. He said that he sometimes said things honestly that he probably shouldn't have if he was trying to protect his own image. That I tend to lean on that history to say it has more to it's more to he doesn't really know. It's not like they went through a point by point thing. But there's also probably some element of not getting into the conversation. I think it's naive to think that there hasn't been some sort of conversation about it.
One could argue the whole thing feels rushed, feels abrupt by the Colts, feels rash. Michael Pittman Jr. kind of solidified that for me, saying that he first got word of it from social media. Do you get the sense that this was a rushed decision, a reactionary decision by the Colts, or that this was something that was thought with all the possible ramifications in mind?
It feels quick to me. It feels like I've been saying to people, it's incredible how fast this kind of franchise direction altering tends to happen in the last 3 years here, last 3 or 4 years here. I guess really ever since the end of 2021. I think that's when I would characterize it started, where it's going one way and then all of a sudden it's just whiplash and you're back the other way. And the biggest thing with this one is, Steichen doesn't really give you a window into his thinking for us to know whether or not he's been contemplating this for weeks or since the hip injury or whatever. But the biggest thing for me that feels like whiplash is we'd been told for a year and a half that the plan was we're going to play him, we're going to see this through, we're going to go through the process, and then all of a sudden that's just gone. And it's we're going to win now, and we'll develop, the development will happen if it happens, which was the message today. So that's the part that feels like whiplash to me, is that for a year and a half it's been one message, and all of a sudden the message has changed.
Do you think win now is a shield for we don't like what we're seeing right now from Anthony Richardson, and we're just going to use Joe Flacco because he's a veteran, because it makes sense as a poster child for win now, when in reality they know what the rest of us do, which is that's maybe the 7 seed. Like, they're not winning anything now. Is that a shield in all of this, or do you think it's legitimate that they think that this suddenly positions them in a better spot to do something this year?
I think they feel like they can make the playoffs with Flacco, and maybe they don't feel like they're going to make the playoffs with the passing game they've had with Richardson. But I also think that the win now message is probably some of what else you're saying. Of like you have to have a pretty harsh evaluation to go away from the plan you've said for a year and a half. I just feel like that. And so I think there's other stuff there. A couple of us tried to get at with Steichen, with Richardson, some of the other stuff. I know Kevin asked about preparation. I asked about stuff that we can't necessarily see, in terms of, like, is he missing reads? Are there cadence issues? Are there planning issues? That kind of thing. We didn't really get answers on that. But Steichen did say some stuff about, like, he's going to learn to be a professional. Richardson said some stuff about preparation, probably reading too much between the lines, but I feel like there's something in there that also has to play into this decision, just based on what people said. You're kind of trying to parse out and read between the lines a little bit, but those are things that kind of kept coming up from both of them.
Do you believe him when he says the tap out had no impact? He said that twice now, 2 days in a row. The tap out had no impact on the decision.
Because I don't want to call him. The hard part is without knowing for sure. I don't want to call him a liar.
Okay,
that's the biggest thing.
Sure,
but I also think that was the moment for. I'll put it this way. I think that was the moment for me on Sunday when I was like, oh, wait, this is different. This is a different negative thing than what we've seen in this story before. So whether or not, like I said, it's hard to know without somebody in the know telling me, this is definitely had to do with it. But I know for me on Sunday, walking out of the locker room or walking out of the press conferences onto the field, the thing I was focused on was that he tapped out to take a breather.
What happens for this group if they wind up losing 3 of the next 4 against the gauntlet of this schedule, and then you're going to suddenly be out of the playoff picture and hand the keys, I guess, back to Anthony Richardson? Is that the play in your mind? Is there a shot where, that doesn't feel good if I'm Anthony Richardson, but is there a shot where they get knocked out of playoff contention and all of a sudden it's like, hey, AR, go do your thing? Is that where we're headed? Or, again, from today's tone, is it Flacco or bust?
The two ways I see the other thing is, like, even if they lose 3 of 4, the AFC is so bad.
Yeah.
If they lose 4 of 4, probably not. But if they lose 3 of 4, there's a chance. There's probably a chance that they're still in it, given the way the back end of the schedule looks. And I think the 2 scenarios, just based on what we've heard today and just thinking through it, the 2 scenarios that get Richardson back in the lineup are Flacco has to play really bad, and the season has to really go away from playoff contention, because you don't make this decision lightly in the first place about where Anthony can improve to the rest of the season. And then the other one is Flacco gets hurt, which, like, you don't want to think about that
right.
or talk about it, but, like, that's the other option.
Jolie Ericson is our guest. He covers the Colts for the Indy Star on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. From a veteran standpoint with this roster, where do you weigh in the idea of, some fans, some pundits saying that you had to make this move because of the tap-out situation and because there's incentives in these contracts for some guys of playoff performances or making the playoffs or doing well at that stage?
I mean, if that's true, they should have approached the offseason differently, in my opinion. Like, there were opportunities to add win, like to make more win now moves, and didn't do it. There's still cap space out there that they could have used. Like, I think the tap out thing is separate. That if like I said, I don't want to call anybody. I don't have
Right.
the reporting. I don't have the reporting to call anybody a liar. But the tap out stuff is separate. If that is the driving force behind it, that's different. But you know, like the other side of it is, the incentive thing. Like, if they were going to go all in, there's a different way to go all in.
That said, we already talked about Richardson getting dealt, which I'm with you, probably not going to happen at this stage, given everything they've said, and the idea of a project is probably more of an offseason move. They're saying they have the best chance to win, Joel. They still have available cap space. Are they now buyers between now and Tuesday?
I mean, history of this administration's tenure would say, unless a Colts player wants out, no.
But I guess I'm with you, because generally they don't do that, but it's unprecedented times to the point that you're saying this roster is a win-now roster, even if you're just saying make the playoffs, and there's still clear holes. If you're really serious about this, wouldn't you try to go ahead and add additional pieces to make said push?
I mean, yeah, but wouldn't you have added pieces in 20 and 21 as well? You know?
Sure.
Like, that's the hard part. It's just really, like, yeah, I mean, there's spots I would add for sure, if I could.
But realistically, that based on the MO of the organization, you don't see that as a bridge, as a pathway?
I'll just be surprised.
Jolie Ericson joins us, covers the Colts for the Indy Star. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Game planning now towards Minnesota and where this roster is, and I know what to monitor the injury report as things go on. Where do things change now schematically for this team, especially on the offensive end?
It's going to be a much more high percentage short passing game based on what we've seen. You know, there was the Alec Pierce explosion at the end of the Jacksonville game that really drove up the yards per attempt for a little bit. But for the most part with Flacco, it's been a much more high percentage short passing game. I mean, if you're a Josh Downs fantasy owner, you probably feel pretty great about the receptions in the PPR league. So it's going to be much more short, much more high percentage. The bulk of the running game kind of falls on Taylor, but that's not necessarily – that's kind of been true even before this. They weren't calling a ton of design runs for Richardson. Now he probably was pulling more attention, but they probably feel like Taylor can kind of do that on the other thing. And then the other piece is, like, they've got to either they've got to protect better. Flacco has to get the ball out faster, or and this could be part of some of the other stuff that, like I said, we don't know, or some of the issues with blitz pickup the last two games have been from the quarterback position, and Flacco will do a better job of making the right checks and calls against blitzes. We'll find out against Minnesota. They blitz a ton.
Do you think there was ever an indication, and maybe it was because of the inaccuracy, maybe it was because of the drops, but the idea of short, quick passing game that they're likely going to use with Flacco, using that for Richardson to help ease him along instead of these long 4- and 5-step drops of routes that take a really long time to develop that you're asking a 22-year-old to have mastered already?
So one of the questions that I think will go unanswered for me is whether or not Richardson has been passing up some of those shorter throws to go long. There's a couple of plays from the Houston game where he takes a deeper target when he has a shorter target open. And, you know, not knowing the reads, not knowing the progressions, it's hard to know. But is it a play style thing? Because, like, I know Steichen wants explosive plays, but Richardson's intended air yards is like 4 more than anybody else in the NFL. And, like, there's a piece of that could just be Richardson feels like he's going to take the shot. And I did wonder if he's been missing receivers. That was part of my question today, was asking about, like, has there been missed reads and stuff like that. I didn't get an answer, but I have wondered if that was part of it, that this boom or bust passing game has been as much Richardson's play style as it has been Steichen's design.
People want to lump in Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard together. I'm not interested in the Shane Steichen conversation to this end right now, but I certainly am with Chris Ballard because of the amount of time that he's spent here. At what point does this fall back on him if the Anthony Richardson experiment has failed, or is he past the point and he has the highest level of job security in the National Football League?
Well, by his own words, he used to say quite a bit before they drafted the quarterback that if they drafted one high and it didn't work out, that he wouldn't get a chance to draft another one. But the flip side of that is, 2022 felt like a potential clean house situation, and it didn't happen that way. So it's kind of hard to predict, honestly. It's hard for me to predict exactly what's going on. But those are the two data points we have is him saying that about just the reality of what happens in the NFL if your drafted quarterback doesn't work out, and then also him making it through one of the worst seasons the Colts have had in a really long time.
What do you think is worse optically for a franchise, being stuck in mediocrity with this fake win now push that they have, or continuing to operate with a general manager that is yet to show progress through 7 seasons?
I just think that this fan base is just sort of really hungry for something to really, really matter again. Whether that's a division title or winning a playoff game and getting deeper into it, whether it's having a young quarterback who looks like the future and isn't struggling the way Richardson has, this is all anecdotal. It's based on conversations. It's hard to know, but I just feel like they've been in this spot for a while, and it feels like where you might be 9-8, you might be 10-7, you get to 11 wins with Phillip Rivers. But the fan base wants a consistent winner. And, part of that is probably that they had it for so long with Peyton in the early years of Luck. But part of it is also just it's been a long time. And any fan base of any team isn't going to want to be kind of on the fringe of the playoff race for a decade. I think that's pretty obvious.
I know you're having to parse through a lot of Shane Steichen's quotes and comments, but the idea of Jim Irsay being involved in this decision-making is what percentage in your mind? How involved was he?
I don't know. I really don't. And I think part of it is just he hasn't been around as much. You don't have as much of a feel for where he's been as you had in the past in terms of just his presence around the team, and he's been around the team. Obviously, he's there for the Dallas Clark thing, that kind of thing. But it does feel like we're not seeing him as many events, and so it's really hard to tell. Steichen said that they talked about it, but it was ultimately his decision. Now, I don't have anything. To say otherwise to that at this point.
Last thing before we get you out of here, Jolie Erickson's our guest, covers the Colts for the Indy Star. They're claiming to be in win now mode, regardless of jobs that are on the line, be it head coach, be it general manager. Is it fair for fans to be upset now if they miss out on the playoffs? Because in my mind, this is a full pivot towards we're going for the postseason. Flacco's the best guy to do that.
Yep. I think you got to make the playoffs now. That's it. There's no other. If you're not playing Richardson, there's no we developed a young guy and we got flashes even though we missed it. No, you got to make the playoffs.
Is that enough to have ramifications if they don't, or do you think it's still based on the data points you outlined?
I think that if they made the playoffs, I think it would probably be a vote in their favor, in the decision makers' favor.
And if they miss,
if they miss, it should be, it should go the other way. But I don't, like I said, I don't have any background information on it.
Joel, if you close your eyes, step away from West 56, count to 10, maybe 20, perhaps hold a Guinness while you do it, you might be able to imagine that you're Jake Query over in Scotland or Ireland right now, away from this mess.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate you making time for us.
The man's timing is incredible. Truly incredible.
You give him a tip of the cap, maybe throw back one of those spotted cows his way.
He doesn't have any more.
Oh, they're all. Of course, they're all gone. I'm sorry. That's my fault. I should have known that. I should have known that. That's on me.
I might have read his social media wrong, but he was at the airport when this was breaking yesterday, right? He saw it and got on a plane and just blissfully flew off into the ether, huh?
He flew out last night, so he was around for the breaking news. So he took off after it all came out.
The man's a genius. We all should aspire to have this level of timing.
Eddie, just for the laugh, clip it, and we'll play that for Jake when he gets back. He'll appreciate that more than anything he could possibly experience in Ireland or Scotland. Thanks, Joel. I appreciate it.
You bet, guys.
That is Jolie Ericson, covers the Colts for the Indy Star. Look, it's a drama-filled time right now to be a Colts fan. Maybe a little bit of worry, but still high level of optimism and expectation to be a Pacers fan, especially when the defending champions are in town. Boston Celtics arrive tonight. Kristen Airy of FanDuel Sports Network joins us next. bounce back tonight when they welcome in the defending champion Boston Celtics for an Eastern Conference Finals rematch. The man on the call on the television side for FanDuel Sports Network, Chris Denary. Nice enough to take some time with us. Chris, happy Wednesday to you.
Hey, happy Wednesday to you. You guys, with the Pacer season starting, the Fever looking for a new coach, and the Colts, you guys got a lot on your docket right now.
Chris, I'll be honest with you. Don't get me wrong. I love my summertime, especially when it crosses over with Racers and Pacers. But when you have everybody going at the same time and there is Nuggets all the way around, I'm all here for it. As you know, it's always good to be involved when sports chaos reigns. Not as much chaos necessarily for the Pacers as much as it is just ironing things out and a slow start. Walk me through the last couple against Philadelphia and Orlando. Clearly big wings are still an issue for this team as they try to grow and improve. But what have been the last couple of days since in preparation for Boston showing you about this group in the early going?
Well, you come off a back-to-back, so they were off yesterday. They had a walkthrough today, and you've got the team that they've been in the Eastern Conference Finals 6 of the last 8 years, coming in off a title. So, by far, this is the best team in what I think is a very deep NBA. I saw improvement over the weekend, in both the Philadelphia and Orlando games. You were right there with a chance to win. You had a 5-point lead inside 90 seconds against Philadelphia, turned it over 3 straight times. Halliburton had to hit the big 3 to force overtime, but you lose and you give up 45 to Maxey. And then Paolo Banchero, he couldn't miss. Suggs as well, but you got down 13 in the first half, came back and took an 8-point lead, but then couldn't close it on the road. So I do think I saw more signs of what this team will be and should be. They're playing, at a much different pace. They want to play faster. Last year they were, top 2 in pace. This year they're right around 22nd. I think the new rules or the way the officials have called things, it's a little bit more physical. And so there's not as much freedom of movement. And I think that's affected the Pacers a little bit. Their 3-point shooting the first 2 games was not good. They've shot it better the last 2. Tyrese Halliburton has shot the ball much better the last 2 games than he did the first 2 games. But, as Rick Carlisle said, yeah, we saw some improvement in Orlando, but it was still a loss. So, you'll have a steep challenge tonight. Now, a lot about Boston. You played them 9 times last year, 5 times in the regular season, 4 times in the playoffs. The Pacers had that big win in the then in-season tournament, now the NBA Cup last year, and really I thought played the Celtics as well as anybody did in the playoffs, yet you got swept 4-0. So tonight will be, a tough matchup against a really, really good opponent.
I know it'll be a game-time decision for Miles Turner, but let's operate under the assumption that he can't go tonight. Where does that change the matchup for Indiana to hang with the defending champs?
Well, I guess the good news is, Boston is not predicated on their bigs down low with they don't have Porzingis. He's out. Al Horford starts. He's a terrific 3-point shooter. I'm not saying he can't score inside, but, Isaiah Jackson has played well since he's come back from injury. The Pacers have utilized Obi Toppin at the 5 in a small ball type lineup. So they've got, some matchups that I think can work for them. But this is where you really miss, James Wiseman. I really thought he was poised to have a bounce-back year and play very, very well for the Pacers, and then he goes down with the Achilles injury in the opener in Detroit. So we'll just have to wait and see on Miles. But this is why you got Wiseman, because, you can't count on somebody playing all 82 games. But like I said, Isaiah Jackson's played some strong basketball off the bench. It would be interesting to see what Rick would do from a starting standpoint, if he would start Isaiah, if he would start Toppin. We'll find out 5:15 tonight. That's when Rick will meet with the media.
This is well down the line, but teams are always trying to upgrade and fine-tune their roster. You mentioned the Pacers wanting Wiseman for situations like this, and especially to add depth to that room. Does that become a point of emphasis or evaluation for them moving forward, the chance to fill that void with outside help, be it at the trade deadline or some other means?
Well, they've got a roster spot, so they have 14 on the roster and then 3 two-way players. And one name I forgot, and I don't want to forget because I think he's done a nice job off the bench, and that's Enrique Freeman. He's a little bit undersized at the post position, but this guy's a ferocious rebounder. He led college basketball in rebounding at Akron last year. So I would think that, and we've already seen him this year, I would think that he would get an opportunity as well. You'll just have to wait and see. I think, the flexibility, I can never, totally know exactly where they are in the cap and the apron and the tax and all that kind of stuff. But I think one of the reasons they did not keep that 15th roster spot when you had Cole Swider and Kendall Brown possibly vying for that was to give them the opportunity at some point, if they need to, they can add a position that they want with that 15th roster spot.
Chris Denary, TV voice of the Pacers, is our guest. You can catch them tonight on the FanDuel Sports Network. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. I'm at a point where I saw enough from Tyrese Halliburton to put him in that NBA star status where I'm not worried, certainly 5 games in, and looked like some of rust, if you want to call it, and familiarity and comfortability came out against Orlando. What have you seen from him through these first couple games, and is it rust? Is it just early struggles? You mentioned the officiating as well, the way they're impacting the overall pace of play.
Well, I think it's the way teams have defended him. I think teams understand, after a year of seeing what the Pacers did last year, they had the 6th best offense from a scoring standpoint in the history of the NBA. And so, now you've got a book, and from a defensive standpoint, teams try to execute what they have. And I think you've seen the Pacers struggle a bit to run. I've noticed teams getting back faster. Even though the Pacers have struggled on the glass at times, as Rick Carlisle says, it's a little hard to run when you're taking the ball out of the net on a field goal or a free throw, or also, if you've turned it over and they're scoring. So, but I think Tyrese, I thought he bounced back after the scoreless game against New York. That was only the 3rd time he'd done that in his career, and the 2nd time with the Pacers. But, I thought he played well against Philadelphia, hit the big shot to force overtime, hit another shot in overtime, and then nearly had a triple-double on Monday night in Orlando. So, he's a guy I don't really worry about. This guy a year ago proved how valuable he is to this franchise. And, you look across the league, Denver lost his first 2 games. Milwaukee's 1-3. There are a lot of teams that unfortunately struggle out of the gate, and the Pacers have been one of those.
Chris, when I look at Benedict Mathurin, I look at him as a catalyst that could help with their offensive pace return to the form that it was a year ago. But I understand Rick Carlisle wants guys that are able to be impactful on both ends. It's been a mixed bag out of the gate for him in that regard. Will it take further growth defensively for consistent minutes to arrive for him? And if it doesn't arrive, do you think you continue to see this 14 one night, 25 another night situational type of play?
Well, I think that's, the one thing that, he's coming in off the injury and fitting back in. I thought he was, played very well in the first 2 games. Last 2 games, he's had just 5 points each. He had 20 and 19 in the first 2 games against Detroit and New York. The Pacers need him. They had the best bench in the league last year, scoring about 47 points per game, and I think their bench right now is ranked number 4. So I think he's a guy that's going to get it. He has too much talent, and this is a very deep team. The one thing that Rick's going to do on a nightly basis is he's going to go with the guys that he thinks can win the game that night. And so if you're not playing well, especially if you're one of the bench players, your minutes are probably going to dwindle that night. But I don't think it carries over to the next game. And so I just think it's incumbent when you come in, and it doesn't have to be just points. It can be assists. It can be defense, loose balls, those kinds of things. Come in and establish yourself on the floor, and that will help keep you on the floor.
Boston is basically an entire run it back from a year ago. They return almost their entire NBA title roster, top offensive rating in the NBA, about 124 points per game. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown leading that charge. How do they go about slowing them down? You hope the offensive pace comes back for the Pacers, but how do they go about slowing them down tonight?
Yeah, they're taking 53-point shots a game, and they're averaging 21 and a half made. And Peyton Pritchard coming off the bench after he went 1 of 9 in his first game, he's like 18 of his last 26 or 27. So, I mean, this is a team that spreads the floor, moves the ball, a lot like Indiana. They play with pace. They're playing with better pace than Indiana is right now and shooting the ball at a high level. So when you have guys like Tatum and Brown and then can sprinkle in the role players, they're just very, very talented. And then Derek White and Drew Holiday are two very, very strong defenders. So this team has it all. And as you said, they've brought everybody back. I think the only guy, not back who played a little bit last year was O'Shea Brissett, the former Pacer. So this, again, as I said, no surprise that they've been in the Eastern Conference Finals 6 of the last 8 years. They've been in a number of NBA Finals and then got their 18th banner last year. So this is a very, very talented team, and the Pacers are going to have to play well to beat them. But they know they can. I mean, they beat them twice last year, including in a huge in-season tournament game. Felt they were very competitive with them in the playoffs. So I'm anxious to watch this game tonight and see how the Pacers perform.
Pacers losers of 3 straight, but as Chris mentioned, they have done well against Boston in the past and were in every one of those games in the conference finals a year ago. A rematch of the Eastern Conference Finals tonight, 7 o'clock. Again, Chris will be on the call for FanDuel Sports Network. 7 o'clock is your tip-off time there. Chris, thanks again for making the time for us. Have a good call, and we'll talk to you the rest of the way.
All right. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Eddie. Talk to you guys soon.
That is Chris Denari, TV voice of your Indiana Pacers. When we come back, final thoughts on the Colts making that firm stance that Joe Flacco is their starter moving forward. Of course, we'll have some bets for you with World Series action still in play, Pacers tonight, NBA action galore as well. It's Query & Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Today's plays of the day brought to you by the fine folks at Greenfield Signs and Lighting. Greenfield Signs, a professional, comprehensive sign company with 2 locations in Central Indiana. They'll take your signage ideas and take hold of the project from design to delivery. Family-owned and managed business for more than 4 generations.
4 generations.
You don't often get a second chance to make a first impression. Make the most out of your first opportunity by going with Greenfield Signs and Lighting. For more information, visit them at greenfieldsigns.com. Today's plays of the day, Game 5 of the World Series between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the New York Yankees. Look, I stressed it yesterday. I'm still a fan. I'm going down with the ship here. But don't let this thing get to L.A. Don't let it get back to L.A. That's all I'm saying. I don't think they're going to, by the way. I think the Dodgers win tonight on the money line. Additionally, this is just what he does. He hits home runs. Give me Freddie Freeman once again today. Not as high a value as it was yesterday, like plus 610, plus 475, but you can shop that around a little bit. That's where I got it at, though. So Dodgers take care of business tonight, and Freddie Freeman goes yard. Pacers Celtics this evening. I'll take over 26.5 points plus assists for Pacers star Tyrese Halliburton.
Ooh, the halibut.
I will also take him to go over 2.5 threes against the Boston Celtics. Last selection for you. This one in the NBA, over in South Beach, I'll take the New York Knicks to one on the money line over the Miami Heat. Eddie, any selections from you on this Wednesday, October 30th for the plays of the day?
Indeed, sir. There are some selections for me. Now, this is an alternate line. I'll take Anthony Davis, 25 plus or over 24.5, depending on the value you can get that at. I got it at minus 135. His prop right now is sitting at is at 26.5, but I like it if you can get him to 25 plus or over 24.5 tonight. The Lakers offense is built through him with J.J. Redick, and it looks like a different AD this year so far early into the season. And I will be taking the over tonight between the Pacers and the Celtics. If I had to guess, I don't think Miles Turner suits up, and if that's the case, then you've got 2 teams that are going to be a little on the smaller side. No real size from either team. Boston already wants to run. We know the Pacers want to run. So I will take the over 235.5 tonight. There's not really a specific prop I'm zeroing in on in this game in terms of players, but those are my plays.
So Eddie Garrison, size matters tonight in Celtics Pacers. That's the takeaway from that bet?
No.
Okay, sorry. Might have misread the room there. Eddie, you're a big baseball aficionado.
I am.
Do you have a lean tonight? Genuinely, like, do you if you were forced to pick, do you have a lean between Dodgers and Yankees? Are we going to LA for Game 6?
Pinstripes.
All right. Eddie says Game 6.
Dave Roberts is letting the Yankees back into this one.
All right. Eddie buying into the momentum, thinks that there is perhaps a tide turning in the World Series. Colts make the decision to bench Anthony Richardson for Joe Flacco yesterday. They reaffirmed that decision today. This is a roster that was not built at any point in this offseason with moves made to win now. Yet the way they're going to spin this decision is Joe Flacco gives them the best chance to win. To that I say, take them at their word. Hold them accountable in that regard. This season has shifted away from the idea of, at least in my stance, well, they're going to lose some games, but at least Anthony Richardson is developing. And if it's a season where there's no playoffs, you live with that because you have answers to your franchise quarterback. That scenario is no longer with us. The Colts killed that off yesterday and today. It is now, they believe they're a win now team. If you're a Colts fan, season ticket holder, frustrated with the proceedings, hold them at their word. They are telling you they are going to make the playoffs because Joe Flacco gives them the best chance to win. You look at their schedule, upcoming, Minnesota, on the road on Sunday.
Oh, Minnesota.
At home against Buffalo.
It's cold up there.
On the road against New York. At home against the Lions.
That's more Canadian, I think.
The one you just did? Yeah, I would agree. There wasn't enough flavor there of the Great White North as much as there was the Great White North over there in Canada across the border.
The Mall of America.
Over that stretch, I don't know how you walk out of there Vikings, Bills, Jets, Lions, anywhere better than 1-3. That puts you at 5-7 with 5 games to play. Where does this roster take a step forward all of a sudden where they're anything more than a mediocre team that's a 7 seed losing first round. They are saying their win now. Hold them accountable to that. Additionally, they are now adjusting the timeline for Anthony Richardson, assuming he's still a part of the roster. John said this yesterday. I said it as well. You make this move, it's a one-time deal. It's over unless injury happens. His time with the Colts and being a franchise quarterback has set sail. But if you're still entertaining hope there, okay, you're going to be more patient as a fan base. You're going to be more patient as a front office next year when you couldn't make it through 10 games over the course of 2 seasons. This movie only ends one way, and it's with a new quarterback. It's not going to be Joe Flacco next year, certainly. Likely won't be Anthony Richardson based on the bed they've made. You can make a decision later on Shane Steichen. The bed should have been made for Chris Ballard 2 years ago. I would hope for the Colts, make the playoffs or not, he should not be the one that takes that next swing who the next quarterback of this franchise is. Whether you still want Shane Steichen play calling, that can be a call for another day. But it has been enough of the Chris Ballard regime to give him another bite at the apple when they don't have the patience as a franchise to wait it out longer than 10 games.
You like that one, don't you? Bite at the apple? It's one of your favorites.
I do. Love a good apple. Apple a day keeps the doctor away. That's
What
they
kind?
say, right?
What kind of apples do you like?
Red Delicious, Granny Smith.
Nice.
Yeah. Think
Not-
so?
I'm not a big apple guy.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Banana more for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't like the texture. It's going to sound weird. The texture of the apple.
Okay.
Not a big.
Well, either way, this is the Colts saying that Anthony Richardson experiment has failed or they either misread it. Either way, it's malpractice against the front office. And the only way you're talking about saving any jobs, not Chris Ballard's, Shane Steichen's in this regard, and the current direction of the franchise, if they make good on their promise to go ahead and make it to the playoffs. Because that's what the situation calls for now, is for them to take care of business on the road with the toughest aspect of their schedule upcoming these next 4 games, and hope that you've somehow survived that gauntlet to be in a better position to be a 7 seed in the AFC. You're rooting for Houston to implode, and you're rooting for teams that are far better than you, Kansas City, Houston, Buffalo, Baltimore, to open up a door for you to contend for a Lombardi. This organization needs to realize there's an identity crisis going on where you're trying to have your cake and eat it too with, oh no, we want to win now, but you didn't do anything in the offseason to build like you were a win now team. I think it's a rash decision by them to pull the cord on Anthony Richardson. I think if you wanted to discipline him for a couple of games and be public about that, fine. But the idea this story ends anywhere but one feel-good little playoff hug or purgatory for the Indianapolis Colts is about the line for them this season. And next year, you'll be left with far more questions than answers in regard to where your quarterback play goes.
Jimmy, you better wrap up. Eddie said wrap up.
Special thank you across the board. I can see the clock, John. Special thank you to Stephen Holder, Dan Purcell. Excuse me, that's the wrong
Hey, is
sheet.
Miles playing tonight?
We'll see you in a couple hours.
Come on,
right?
Miles. I want to see Miles get hyped like he was in the postseason. This is a Miles. I know it's October and nobody gets hyped, but dang. Let's get hyped a little bit.
I'd
Paul.
love to get hyped. I
Gotta
worry he's
whip a
not
little
going to play.
Boston Celtic ass tonight, man.
That'd be
bring
nice.
everybody back.
Absolutely nice.
Don't get beat by 50.
Special thanks to Charles McDonald, Jolie Ericson, and Chris Denary. John will take you the rest of the way. Right with JMV is next. We'll be back in here noon to 3 tomorrow. Thanks for listening to Query & Company.